The auction block at Ordara's central market reeked of desperation and stale air. Beneath flickering plasma lights, cages of various sizes lined the dusty floor, each containing what the traders euphemistically called living merchandise. The market bustled with potential buyers from a dozen different species, their voices a cacophony of haggling and dismissal. In the farthest corner, almost hidden in shadow, sat a small, rusted cage. Inside, a thin, blue-skinned girl huddled with her knees drawn to her chest, her name tag, faded and worn from being reattached multiple times. Red merchandise, 7291, defective, return. But scratched beneath it in tiny letters was the name Lyra. Lyra didn't look up when shadows fell across her cage. She had learned long ago that making eye contact only invited cruelty. The tag hanging from her cage detailed her numerous returns. 7 different owners had deemed her unsuitable and sent her back to the auction house. Too quiet, unresponsive, refuses to speak, damaged goods. "What's the price for this one?" a voice asked, different from the usual gruff tones of traders. The market overseer, a bulbous creature with too many eyes, chuckled wetly. "That one? You don't want her, sir. 7 returns. Something wrong with her programming, if you ask me. Won't speak. Won't work properly. I'm thinking of just scrapping her for parts." Lyra flinched imperceptibly at the words. She had heard similar sentiments before, but the casual mention of dismemberment still sent ice through her veins. "I didn't ask for your assessment," the voice replied, firmer now. "I asked for the price." Lyra risked a quick glance upward. A human man stood there, unusual, as humans rarely ventured to the outer markets of Ordara. He was tall and lean, with dark hair streaked with gray at the temples and hands that bore the calluses and small scars of someone who worked with machines. His eyes, unlike those of the traders, didn't assess her for value, but seemed to recognize something in her huddled form. 200 credits, the overseer said dismissively. "But you're wasting good money." The human didn't respond to the warning. Instead, he tapped his wristband, transferring the credits without haggling, another departure from market custom. "Paperwork's transferred to your device," the overseer said, already turning away with disinterest. "No returns on damaged goods." The human knelt in front of the cage, meeting Lyra at eye level. She immediately looked down, bracing for the inevitable disappointment and anger that would follow when he discovered her defects. "My name is Kai," he said quietly, just for her ears. "I'm a mechanic. I have a small ship docked nearby. You'll have your own quarters there, with a door that locks from the inside." He paused, then added, "I'm not buying you. I'm paying the ransom they're demanding to let you go." Lyra didn't move or acknowledge his words. She had heard kind beginnings before, only for the truth to reveal itself later. Kai stood and operated the electronic lock on her cage. The door swung open with a metallic groan, but Lyra remained frozen in place. "You can come out," Kai said, stepping back to give her space. "Or you can stay there while I carry the cage. Your choice. But we should leave this place soon." After a long moment, Lyra uncurled herself and stepped cautiously from the cage. She was smaller than she had appeared, barely reaching Kai's chest. Her blue skin was marred with pale scars, and her large, dark eyes darted nervously around the market. She wore standard-issue merchandise clothing, a gray tunic that hung loosely on her frame. Kai didn't touch her or urge her forward. He simply turned and began walking slowly toward the market exit, glancing back occasionally to ensure she followed. Lyra trailed several paces behind, her posture tense, ready to flee although she had nowhere to go. They walked through the crowded market in silence. Various traders called out to Kai, offering newer, better merchandise, but he ignored them all. At the docking bay entrance, a security guard looked at Lyra's tag and then at the transfer document on Kai's device before waving them through with indifference. Kai's ship was small and weathered, clearly a working vessel rather than a luxury craft. The Phoenix read the faded lettering on its hull. Inside, the narrow corridors were clean, but cluttered with tools and spare parts. The air smelled of engine oil and the faint scent of the herbs Kai used in his cooking. "This is the main cabin," Kai explained, as they entered a small living space with a table, 2 chairs, and a compact kitchenette. "My quarters are through there." He pointed to a door on the left. "And this," he continued, approaching a door on the right, "would be yours." He pressed his palm to the access panel, and the door slid open to reveal a small but comfortable room with a bed, a storage unit, and a tiny private washroom. "The lock works," Kai demonstrated, pressing a button inside the room that caused the door to close and a small light on the panel to turn red. "It can only be opened from the inside when locked. The ship's computer responds to voice commands for lighting and temperature." He opened the door again and stepped back into the main cabin, giving Lyra space to explore the room on her own. She remained in the doorway, unmoving. "You must be hungry," Kai said, moving to the kitchenette. "I'll prepare something. You can eat in your room if you prefer." Lyra watched him warily as he efficiently prepared a simple meal of synthetic protein and vegetables. He placed a portion on a plate and set it on the table, then prepared a second plate and retreated to the other side of the cabin, giving her plenty of space. "I need to get us off planet," he said after a moment. "The navigation system is preset. We'll be breaking atmosphere in about 20 minutes. You can eat and rest. We can talk later, or not at all if that's your preference." With that, he took his plate and headed toward the cockpit, leaving Lyra alone in the main cabin. Once the sound of his footsteps faded, Lyra cautiously approached the table. She quickly grabbed the plate and retreated to her room, pressing the lock button as soon as the door closed. Only then did she sink to the floor, back against the wall, and begin to eat with the desperate efficiency of someone who had learned that food could be taken away at any moment. When the plate was clean, Lyra sat in silence, listening to the hum of the engines as the ship lifted off. The sensation of breaking atmosphere was familiar. She had been transported between planets and owners many times before. But the locked door and private space were entirely new experiences. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for the deception to reveal itself. Previous owners had sometimes started with kindness before showing their true intentions. The locked door might be a test. The food might be temporary. Nothing in her experience had prepared her for genuine safety. In the morning, a gentle knock on the door startled her from her vigil. "There's breakfast in the main cabin if you're hungry." Kai's voice came through the door. "I'll be in the engine room most of the day. Ship's running a bit rough after that atmospheric exit." Lyra waited until she heard his footsteps retreat before cautiously unlocking the door. The main cabin was empty, but as promised, food sat on the table. Some kind of grain porridge with fruit, still warm, and a cup of water. After quickly consuming the meal, Lyra stood uncertainly in the main cabin. In previous situations, inactivity would have been punished. Owners expected their merchandise to be useful, to earn their keep. Following the distant sounds of Kai working, she made her way through the narrow corridors until she found the engine room. The space was dominated by the ship's power core, surrounded by various systems and control panels. Kai was half inside an access panel, muttering to himself as he adjusted something with a specialized tool. Lyra stood silently in the doorway, waiting to be noticed and assigned a task. After several minutes, Kai extracted himself from the panel and wiped his hands on a cloth. He started slightly when he turned and saw her. "Oh, hello," he said, seemingly unsurprised by her presence. "Did you need something?" Lyra didn't respond, her eyes fixed on a point just past his shoulder. Kai studied her for a moment, then gestured to the open panel. I'm trying to recalibrate the auxiliary power coupling. The primary system is drawing too much energy during atmospheric transitions. He turned back to the panel and resumed working. After a moment, he spoke again without looking at her. If you're interested in learning about ship systems, you're welcome to watch. Or there are data tablets in the storage compartment by the cockpit with technical manuals. Lyra remained motionless, but her eyes shifted to the exposed machinery. The configuration was familiar, similar to systems she had encountered before, though this one was older and had been modified extensively. Kai continued working, narrating his actions as if to himself, though his slightly raised voice suggested he was speaking for her benefit. The problem is this connector here. It's not rated for the power load, but the proper replacement part costs about 10 times what I can afford. So I'm trying to create a bypass that will spread the load across these secondary couplings. He frowned as he tested a connection. The trouble is, if I direct too much power through this circuit, it could overload the navigation systems. But if I don't divert enough, we'll keep experiencing those power fluctuations during atmospheric entry and exit. Lyra took a single step forward, then another. Kai continued working, not acknowledging her approach. When she was close enough to see clearly into the panel, she noticed immediately what he had missed: a small regulator that had been installed backward. Such a simple mistake, but one that would prevent the system from functioning correctly, no matter how he reconfigured the power flow. Without thinking, she pointed to the component. Kai followed her gesture and squinted at the regulator. After a moment, his eyebrows rose in realization. "It's backward," he murmured. "How did I miss that?" He carefully extracted the component and reinserted it correctly. "That was installed during my last major overhaul, about 6 months ago. I'd completely forgotten it was there." He turned to Lyra with genuine appreciation in his eyes. "Thank you. You just saved me hours of frustration." Lyra quickly looked down, unused to gratitude. She took a step back, returning to a safer distance. "You know ship systems," Kai observed, not as a question. "Were you trained as a technician?" Lyra gave no response, but her eyes darted briefly to the panel again. "Would you like to help me finish the recalibration?" Kai asked, holding out a small tool. Sometimes, having smaller hands makes these adjustments easier. After a long moment of hesitation, Lyra reached for the tool. Kai released it without their hands touching, respecting her obvious aversion to physical contact. For the next few hours, they worked side by side in the engine room. Kai continued his running commentary, explaining each system and repair. Lyra never spoke, but she worked with an efficiency and understanding that revealed considerable technical knowledge. By midday, the power coupling was repaired, and the ship's systems were running more smoothly than they had in months. Kai straightened up and stretched his back. "I think we've earned some lunch," he said. "I'll prepare something." In the main cabin, Kai efficiently assembled 2 meals, while Lyra stood near the corridor entrance, unsure whether to retreat to her room or remain. "You're very good with ship systems," Kai commented as he placed the food on the table. "Where did you learn, if you don't mind my asking?" Lyra remained silent, her eyes on the floor. Kai nodded, as if she had answered. "You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me anything. But I want you to know that you're safe here. This isn't a transaction or a purchase. You're not merchandise." He pushed one plate to the far side of the table and took his own to the opposite end, giving her plenty of space. "You can eat wherever you're comfortable. I'll be plotting our course after lunch. We're headed to a neutral station in the Epsilon sector. I have some deliveries to make." Lyra waited until Kai had begun eating before approaching the table. She took her plate and retreated halfway across the room, eating while standing, her back to the wall. The following days established a pattern. Lyra would emerge from her room only when she knew Kai was occupied elsewhere on the ship. She would complete various maintenance tasks unsupervised, fixing minor issues that Kai might not have noticed for weeks. Food would appear at regular intervals, and Kai would maintain a running commentary about the ship, their course, or the repairs he was conducting, never pressing Lyra for responses. On the sixth day, Kai found Lyra in the cargo hold, systematically organizing the spare parts that had been haphazardly stored there. "You've got a better system than I ever managed," he observed from the doorway, careful not to enter her space abruptly. Lyra paused in her work but didn't look up. "I've been meaning to show you something," Kai continued. "If you're interested." He placed a data tablet on a nearby crate and stepped back. "These are the files I was able to download about your previous—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Situations. There's not much. The market keeps records primarily for transaction purposes, not personal histories. But there might be something about your origins." Lyra remained motionless for several long moments. Then, slowly, she approached the tablet. Kai had already stepped back to the doorway, giving her space to examine the information privately. "I'll be in the cockpit if you need anything," he said, before leaving her alone with the data. The tablet contained a sparse record of transactions. Lyra had been first registered in the system 8 standard years ago, sold by a mining corporation that had gone bankrupt and liquidated all assets, including the workers they had essentially owned. The record listed her age at that time as approximately 12 standard years, her species as Allurian, and her planet of origin as unknown. What followed was a succession of sales and returns. A wealthy collector who found her too melancholy. A research facility that deemed her unresponsive to testing protocols. A household that reported she refused to speak or interact with family members. A transport company that complained she worked adequately, but created discomfort among other staff. Each return added to her designation as defective, reducing her value and the quality of her subsequent placements. There was nothing about her life before the mining corporation. Nothing about her family, or how an Allurian child had ended up as corporate property. Nothing about her homeworld or culture. Lyra sat with the tablet for hours, reading and rereading the sparse details of her documented existence. When she finally set it down, night cycle had begun on the ship, and the lights had automatically dimmed to simulate evening. She made her way to the main cabin, where she found Kai at the table, reviewing shipping manifests on his own tablet. He looked up when she entered, but didn't comment on the late hour. "There's food in the thermal unit if you're hungry," he said simply. Lyra retrieved the meal and, for the first time, sat at the table across from Kai to eat. They remained in companionable silence as she finished her food. After she had cleaned her plate, Lyra reached for Kai's tablet. He released it without question. Using the stylus, she wrote a single word and turned the screen toward him. "Lyra!" Kai looked at the name, then at her. "Is that your name? Your real name?" She nodded once, the barest inclination of her head. "Lyra," Kai repeated, testing the sound. "It's a beautiful name." She took the tablet back and wrote again. "Not merchandise." "No," Kai agreed firmly. "Never merchandise. A person. Lyra." Something in her posture eased slightly. A tension releasing that had been present since he'd first seen her in the market. The next morning, Lyra was already in the main cabin when Kai emerged from his quarters. She had prepared a simple breakfast and sat waiting at the table. "Good morning," Kai said, pleasantly surprised. "Thank you for making breakfast." Lyra didn't respond verbally, but she pushed a data tablet toward him. On it, she had written, "Where are we going?" "The Epsilon Neutral Station," Kai answered as he sat down. "It's a trading hub that operates independently from the major systems. I have contracts to deliver replacement parts to several businesses there. The station has strict regulations against slavery and trafficking, so your merchandise tag won't mean anything there." Lyra considered this information as they ate. When they finished, she wrote another question. "What happens to me there?" Kai read it and looked up to meet her eyes. "Whatever you want," he said simply. "You could stay on the station. There are employment opportunities for someone with your technical skills. You could seek information about Allurians or try to locate others of your species. Or," he hesitated, "you could continue traveling with me while you decide. The Phoenix isn't much, but there's always work for independent mechanics and cargo haulers." Lyra stared at him, searching his face for deception. Finding none, she wrote, "Why help me?" Kai was quiet for a long moment. "Because it was the right thing to do," he finally said. "And because I recognized something in you at that market. I spent some time in a labor camp when I was younger. Political prisoners were treated as property too. I remember what it's like to be seen as less than a person. No one should experience that." Lyra absorbed this information, then wrote one more question. "If I stay, what do you want from me?" "Your help with repairs, if you're willing." Kai answered honestly. "You're more skilled than I am with certain systems, but mostly your company. Space travel gets lonely. Having someone to share meals with, even in silence, makes the journey better." Lyra didn't respond, but she took the tablet and returned to her quarters. Kai didn't see her for the rest of the day. The Phoenix arrived at Epsilon Neutral Station 3 days later. The massive structure hung in space like a metal star, its 5 arms extending from a central hub, each housing different sectors of the station's operations. Bright lights illuminated docking bays and commerce centers, while transport vessels of various sizes moved in carefully controlled patterns around the station. As they docked, Kai explained the delivery schedule. "I have 4 stops to make. It should take about 3 standard days to complete all the transactions and acquire the return cargo. You're welcome to accompany me or explore the station on your own. Everyone here carries identification, but visitors can obtain temporary passes at the Central Administration Office." Lyra had emerged from her quarters wearing the new clothes Kai had synthesized for her: practical work pants, a long-sleeved shirt, and a vest with multiple pockets. She had discarded the merchandise tag, though the pale band of skin where it had hung remained a visible reminder. At the station security checkpoint, the officer barely glanced at Kai's credentials before waving him through. When Lyra stepped forward without documentation, the officer frowned. "All entrants require identification," he stated firmly. "She's my assistant," Kai explained. "Recently hired. We haven't had an opportunity to process formal documentation yet." The officer looked skeptical. "Species?" "Allurian," Kai answered. The officer checked his database. "Allurian. Not common in this sector." He looked at Lyra more carefully. "Name?" There was a moment of tense silence. Kai opened his mouth to answer for her, but before he could speak, a soft voice said, "Lyra." Both men turned to her in surprise. Her voice was slightly raspy from disuse but clear. "My name is Lyra," she repeated, meeting the officer's eyes directly. The officer nodded and processed a temporary identification card. "Visitor status granted for 1 station cycle. Renewal available at Central Administration." As they moved away from the checkpoint, Kai glanced at Lyra with a mixture of surprise and pride, but made no comment about her sudden speech. Instead, he pulled up a station map on his device. "My first delivery is in the manufacturing sector. Arm 3. Would you like to come along, or would you prefer to explore on your own?" "With you," Lyra said, the words still strange in her mouth after so long without speaking. Kai nodded and led the way through the crowded main concourse. The station buzzed with activity: traders haggling over goods, travelers consulting maps, maintenance workers repairing systems, and service drones weaving through the crowds on programmed routes. For the next 2 days, Lyra accompanied Kai on his deliveries, gradually becoming more comfortable navigating the station. She spoke rarely, but with increasing confidence when necessary. Her technical knowledge proved valuable during several transactions, earning her appreciative nods from Kai's clients. On the 3rd day, as they were completing the final delivery to a manufacturing facility. An alert sounded on Kai's communication device. Incoming message for Mechanic Kai aboard Vessel Phoenix. The automated voice announced, "Priority level, urgent." Kai frowned and activated the message. A holographic notification appeared. Legal proceeding initiated. Your presence is required at Justice Hall, Central Hub, Level 5, at 1400 hours. Subject: dispute over property ownership. Claimant: Merchant Alcor of the Tressian Trade Guild. Lyra froze at the merchant's name, her face draining of color. "Who is Alcor?" Kai asked, noticing her reaction. "Owner. Before the market," Lyra whispered. "He sold me when I wouldn't." She trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. Kai's expression hardened. "We'll go to the hearing," he said firmly. "Epsilon Station has strict anti-slavery laws. He has no claim to you here." Lyra shook her head, panic evident in her eyes. "He has influence, money, connections." "So we'll fight with the law on our side," Kai insisted. "You're a person, not property. The station authorities will recognize that." Lyra didn't appear convinced, but she followed Kai to the Central Hub's Justice Hall, a formal chamber where disputes were settled by appointed adjudicators from various neutral systems. The hall was designed to intimidate, with high ceilings and austere decor. A raised bench at the front seated 3 adjudicators, while opposing tables faced each other before them. Several observers sat in rows behind the tables, some appearing to be legal representatives, others merely curious onlookers. At one table stood a tall, elegantly dressed humanoid with pale green skin and elongated features. His expensive clothing and multiple decorative implants marked him as wealthy and influential. His thin lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes when he spotted Lyra. "Ah, my property returns," he said smoothly as they entered. "How convenient." "She is not property," Kai stated firmly, placing himself between Lyra and Alcor. "She's a free person under station law." "A touching sentiment," Alcor replied dismissively. "But I have documentation proving ownership prior to your acquisition. The merchandise was sold without my consent during my absence, an illegal transaction that I'm here to rectify." Before Kai could respond, the adjudicators entered and took their places. The central figure, an elderly Vexian with translucent skin that revealed the complex network of veins beneath, called the proceedings to order. "This tribunal will now consider the ownership dispute filed by Merchant Alcor of the Tressian Trade Guild," the adjudicator announced. "The dispute concerns an Allurian female currently in the company of Mechanic Kai of Independent Vessel Phoenix. Both parties are present. We will proceed with evidence presentation." Alcor smoothly approached the bench, presenting a data crystal to the clerk. "My documentation of legal purchase and ownership of the Allurian unit, designated as household property. As you will see, I never authorized its sale. It was removed from my estate during my trade mission to the outer colonies. The subsequent transactions were therefore invalid." The adjudicators reviewed the documentation on their screens. The central adjudicator looked up. "The initial purchase appears legitimate under Tressian law. However, Epsilon Station does not recognize sentient beings as property. This creates a jurisdictional complexity." "With respect," Alcor countered, "the legal status of the merchandise under Tressian law should be honored through interplanetary reciprocity agreements. My rights as an owner supersede local statutes regarding classification." The adjudicator turned to Kai. "Do you have documentation of your purchase?" Kai stepped forward. "Yes. I have the transfer record from the Ordara market." He submitted his own data crystal. "But more importantly, I have testimony that Lyra is a person, not property. She speaks, makes decisions, and possesses advanced technical skills. Under Epsilon Station law, these qualities define personhood regardless of origin." The adjudicators conferred briefly before the central figure addressed Lyra directly. This tribunal would hear from the subject of the dispute. Step forward. Lyra hesitated, trembling slightly, but moved to stand before the bench. Her eyes remained downcast. "Your designated name is Lyra," the adjudicator asked. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "Please respond verbally for the record," the adjudicator instructed. "Yes," Lyra whispered. "My name is Lyra." "And you were previously in the possession of Merchant Alcor?" "Yes." Her voice was barely audible. "Speak up," Alcor snapped from his table. "And address the adjudicators properly, as you were trained." Lyra flinched at his tone but raised her head slightly. "Yes, adjudicator. I was his property." The central adjudicator studied her carefully. Under Epsilon Station law, sentient beings cannot be classified as property. Do you consider yourself a sentient being with self-determination? Alcor interrupted before Lyra could answer. The merchandise has been programmed to respond affirmatively to such questions. It's a security feature to prevent detection of unlicensed sentient property in jurisdictions with restrictive ownership laws. Merchant Alcor, the adjudicator said sternly, you will refrain from interrupting or risk censure. The question was directed to Lyra. Lyra's eyes darted between the adjudicator and Alcor, fear evident in her expression. For a long moment, she remained silent, her breathing shallow and rapid. Then, something shifted in her posture. She straightened slightly and lifted her gaze to meet the adjudicator's eyes directly. "I am a person," she said, her voice stronger than before. "I think, I feel, I remember, I create." She paused, gathering courage. "I was not manufactured or programmed. I was born. I had a family once, though I barely remember them now." The chamber had grown completely silent. All attention focused on the small, blue-skinned figure standing before the bench. "When I was young, I was taken by mining corporations. I don't know what happened to my family. I was property there, and then property to him." She gestured toward Alcor, without looking at him. "He wanted me to," she faltered briefly, "provide services I refused to perform, so he sold me as defective." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "In the market, I was examined like a malfunctioning device, bought and returned 7 times because I wouldn't speak, wouldn't comply, wouldn't pretend to be an object. They called me defective because I wouldn't stop being a person." Tears had formed in her large dark eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Kai didn't buy me. He freed me. He gave me choice, safety, dignity. He restored my name." She took a deep breath. "I am not merchandise. I am Lyra, and I ask this tribunal to recognize my personhood." The chamber remained silent for several heartbeats after she finished speaking. Even Alcor seemed momentarily stunned by her unexpected eloquence. The adjudicators conferred in whispered tones, occasionally glancing at the documents before them. Finally, the central figure addressed the chamber. "This tribunal finds that the being known as Lyra has demonstrated clear signs of sentience, self-awareness, and personhood as defined by Epsilon Station law. While we acknowledge the documentation presented by Merchant Alcor, we cannot enforce ownership claims over sentient beings within our jurisdiction." Alcor's face contorted with anger. "This is outrageous. I paid good money for that merchandise. You cannot simply invalidate legitimate business transactions based on sentimental notions of personhood." "Your objection is noted," the adjudicator replied coolly. "However, our ruling stands. Furthermore, this tribunal recommends an investigation into your trading practices regarding sentient beings. If you wish to appeal this decision, you may petition the Central Systems High Court, but be advised that similar statutes apply in most neutral zones." The adjudicator turned to Lyra. "This tribunal recognizes your status as a free and independent person, with all rights thereof under Epsilon Station law. You are not bound by any previous ownership claims. A formal identification document will be issued to you before your departure from the station." With a formal gesture, the adjudicator concluded the proceedings. As the chamber began to empty, Alcor approached Kai and Lyra, his expression dark with fury. "This isn't over," he hissed. "That property represents a significant investment. I'll pursue this matter in more accommodating jurisdictions." "You heard the ruling," Kai replied calmly. "Any attempt to enforce your invalid claim would constitute kidnapping under station law. I suggest you accept the decision and move on." Alcor's eyes narrowed. "Enjoy your stolen goods while you can, mechanic. Not all spaces are as progressive as Epsilon Station." With that parting threat, he swept from the chamber, his expensive cloak billowing behind him. Lyra stood motionless, still processing the tribunal's decision. "I'm free?" she asked softly, as if afraid speaking the word might somehow reverse the ruling. "Legally recognized as such," Kai confirmed with a warm smile. "Though you've been free since you stepped aboard the Phoenix, this just makes it official." A station official approached with a data pad. "I need your biometric signature for the permanent identification document," she explained to Lyra. "It will be recognized throughout the neutral zones and most central systems." As Lyra completed the process, the reality of her new status began to sink in. For the first time in her memory, she was not classified as property. Her existence as a person was officially acknowledged and protected by law. When they returned to the Phoenix that evening, Lyra seemed both exhausted and energized by the day's events. She moved through the familiar spaces of the ship with a new awareness, touching surfaces and objects as if experiencing them differently. "Thank you," she said as they sat in the main cabin, the words still awkward but heartfelt. "For everything." Kai smiled. "You did the hard part, standing up to Alcor, speaking to the tribunal. That took real courage." "What happens now?" Lyra asked, echoing her question from days earlier, but with a different inflection now that her freedom was secured. "That depends on what you want," Kai replied. "The offer to stay aboard as my assistant still stands. The Phoenix could use your expertise, and I've grown rather fond of your company. But with your new status, you have options. Epsilon Station would employ someone with your skills, or you could seek passage to the central systems where there might be information about other Allurians." Lyra considered for a long moment. "I want to stay," she finally said. "For now. Learn more, see more." She paused, then added, "Help others, like me." Kai nodded thoughtfully. "There are plenty who need help out there. The markets on Ordara are just one small part of a much larger problem." "We could find them," Lyra suggested, a new determination in her voice. "Free them." "It would be dangerous," Kai warned. "Alcor won't be the last to challenge your status. There are powerful interests involved in the sentient trade." "I'm not afraid," Lyra said, and for the first time since Kai had met her, it seemed true. Not anymore. Over the following months, Lyra's transformation continued. Her speech became more fluid, though she still preferred efficient communication rather than unnecessary words. Her technical skills flourished as Kai taught her everything he knew about ship systems and mechanics. In turn, she surprised him with innovative solutions to problems that had plagued the Phoenix for years. They established a reputation in the neutral zones as skilled repair specialists who would take on challenging jobs that others avoided. Between contracts, they began a more clandestine operation, identifying and assisting beings classified as property who sought freedom. Sometimes, this meant using their legitimate business as cover to transport escapees to safe jurisdictions. Other times, it involved providing legal information about rights and protections in different systems. Occasionally, when legal means failed, they resorted to more direct interventions, though Kai was careful to minimize risks, aware that Lyra's freedom remained precarious in certain regions. 6 standard months after the tribunal ruling, they docked at a small outpost on the edge of the neutral zones. The facility catered to independent traders and travelers, offering repairs, supplies, and anonymous transactions with few questions asked, while Kai negotiated for parts they needed. Lyra noticed a familiar scene in a shadowy corner of the outpost's market section, a small cage containing a hunched figure. Without hesitation, she approached, finding a young male of a species she didn't recognize, wearing the unmistakable tag of merchandise. "Hello," she said softly, kneeling beside the cage. "My name is Lyra." The boy looked up, his expression guarded and hopeless, the same expression Lyra had worn for years. "I was in a cage like this once," she continued. "Not anymore." Before she could say more, a rough hand grabbed her shoulder. "You interested in buying, or just wasting my time?" growled a heavy-set trader. Lyra stood, facing the man with a calmness that would have been impossible months ago. "How much?" The negotiation was brief. When Kai found her minutes later, Lyra was already entering the access code to open the cage. "We have another passenger," she informed him simply. Kai assessed the situation quickly. "The Phoenix is getting crowded," he observed with a slight smile. "We might need a larger vessel soon." The pattern repeated itself over the following year. The Phoenix became known in certain circles as a vessel of second chances. Lyra developed protocols for helping their temporary passengers adjust to freedom, drawing on her own experiences to guide others through the transition. Not all of their rescues stayed aboard. Many moved on to establish communities in the neutral zones, or sought family connections in the central systems. But some, like Mex, the young boy from the outpost, became permanent crew members, learning technical skills and eventually assisting with new rescues. As their operation grew, so did the risks. Twice, they narrowly avoided detention in systems where their activities violated local property laws. Once, they were forced to make an emergency jump to escape a pursuit vessel hired by a particularly vengeful former owner. During this period, Kai and Lyra's relationship evolved from rescuer and rescued to equal partners. She no longer deferred to him in decisions, and he came to rely on her judgment in increasingly complex situations. What began as a simple act of compassion had transformed into a shared mission. 14 months after Lyra's tribunal hearing, they received an encrypted message from a contact in the Epsilon legal system, warning that Alcor had filed claims in multiple jurisdictions and hired trackers to locate them. The threat they had dismissed had grown more serious with their rising profile. "Perhaps we should consider a lower profile for a while," Kai suggested as they reviewed the warning. "Focus on repairs. Let things cool down." Lyra shook her head firmly. "That's what they want. For us to hide, to stop." "It's not stopping to ensure our safety," Kai argued. "We can't help others if we're captured or worse." Their debate was interrupted by an alert from the navigation system. An unidentified vessel was approaching on an intercept course. "Trackers?" Lyra asked, moving quickly to the cockpit. "Possibly," Kai replied, following her. "Or just routine patrol. Either way, best to change course." Before they could alter their trajectory, the communication system activated. A stern voice filled the cabin. "Vessel Phoenix. This is the enforcement cruiser Vigilant. Prepare for boarding and inspection under authority of the Trade Guild Compact. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force." Kai and Lyra exchanged alarmed glances. The Trade Guild Compact was the legal framework that legitimized many of the transactions they had been disrupting. "They can't board without cause in neutral space," Kai said, quickly checking their position. "We're still 2 light jumps from Guild jurisdiction." "Alcor has influence," Lyra reminded him. "They might claim probable cause." Kai activated the communication system. "Enforcement vessel. We are in neutral space beyond Guild jurisdiction. Please state the specific authority and cause for boarding." There was a brief pause before the response came. "We have a warrant for the seizure of stolen property aboard your vessel. Compliance is mandatory regardless of current position." "Stolen property?" Lyra repeated quietly. the old designation landing like a physical blow. They mean you, Kai said grimly. Alcor must have found a sympathetic magistrate to issue the warrant. The Phoenix shuddered as the enforcement vessel locked on with a tractor beam, preventing escape. Options? Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the danger. Kai quickly assessed their situation. We can't outrun them. Fighting would be suicide. That leaves diplomatic solutions or legal challenges. Or option 3, Lyra said, moving to the navigation console. The scar. Kai looked at her in alarm. The asteroid field? That's too dangerous. The Phoenix isn't maneuverable enough. I've upgraded the navigation systems, Lyra reminded him. And I know every centimeter of this ship now. It will respond. Before Kai could object further, Lyra engaged the auxiliary thrusters in a precise pattern that created a momentary strain on the tractor beam. The enforcement vessel's hold wavered just enough for her to execute a sharp course correction toward the nearby asteroid field, known as the Scar. The enforcement vessel's commander came back on the communication system, his tone now urgent. Phoenix, reverse course immediately. The Scar is a navigational hazard zone. We will not follow you in. That's the idea, Lyra muttered as she guided the ship deeper into the field of tumbling space rocks. The Phoenix shuddered as smaller asteroids impacted the shields. Kai moved to the engineering station, diverting power to forward deflectors. This is incredibly risky, he warned. One direct hit from a larger asteroid. Trust me, Lyra said simply, her hands dancing across the controls with practiced precision. The Phoenix responded to her commands like an extension of herself, weaving through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow. Behind them, the enforcement vessel hovered at the edge of the field, unwilling to pursue but maintaining visual contact. They're scanning us, Kai reported, probably calling for smaller pursuit craft. We only need to reach the other side, Lyra replied, focused on navigating the increasingly dense field. There's a jump point near the Farspur Nebula. If we can reach it, we can be in the outer systems before they mobilize. For 20 tense minutes, they threaded their way through the asteroid field, each near miss causing alarms to blare throughout the ship. Just as they approached the outer boundary, the scanners detected 2 small pursuit vessels entering the field from the opposite side. They're trying to cut us off, Kai observed. Fast interceptors. Less firepower but more maneuverability. Lyra adjusted their course, aiming for a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. Perfect. Perfect? Kai echoed incredulously. That's a death trap. For them, yes, Lyra agreed. As they approached the cluster, she suddenly cut main engines and activated a short reverse thrust, causing the Phoenix to drop below the plane of the field, just as the interceptors converged on their position. The pursuing vessels, committed to their intercept course, found themselves facing each other with the asteroid cluster between them. Their evasive maneuvers avoided a collision with each other, but sent one ship careening into a massive asteroid, while the other veered off course, shields flaring from multiple impacts. Lyra immediately re-engaged the main engines, propelling them clear of the field and toward the jump point. Plotting course for the outer systems, she announced, her voice betraying a hint of pride. Coordinates locked in. Kai shook his head in amazement. That was either the most brilliant or most reckless navigation I've ever witnessed. Both, Lyra admitted with the ghost of a smile. But necessary. Once safely in hyperspace, they assessed their situation. The pursuit had been evaded for now, but the existence of a formal warrant meant they would face similar challenges in many systems. We need a new plan, Kai said as they gathered in the main cabin with Mex and the 2 other permanent crew members they had rescued over the past year. And possibly a new ship. The Phoenix is too well known now. Not a new ship, Lyra said firmly. The Phoenix is home. But perhaps a new purpose. What do you mean? Kai asked. Lyra activated the main display, showing a star chart of the outer systems. These regions have minimal guild influence. Some have established settlements that actively oppose the sentient trade. What if, instead of rescuing one or two at a time, we created a permanent sanctuary? A place where people like us could not only find freedom, but build something new. The idea took root quickly. Using their remaining credits and calling in favors from those they had helped, they acquired a decommissioned orbital platform in a remote system. The structure was dilapidated but sound, originally designed as a refueling station but abandoned when trade routes shifted. They spent 3 months renovating the platform, transforming it from a utilitarian facility into a habitable space. Lyra's technical expertise proved invaluable, repurposing systems and creating innovative solutions to life support challenges. They named it Homeward Light, a beacon for those seeking not just escape, but belonging. Word spread through carefully established networks. Former passengers returned, bringing others in need. The population grew steadily, each new arrival contributing skills and knowledge to the community. They established hydroponic gardens, medical facilities, and educational programs. Most importantly, they created a legal foundation, registering the platform as an independent entity under Outer Systems provisional governance. 18 months after Lyra had first spoken in the Epsilon Station security checkpoint, she stood in the central chamber of Homeward Light, addressing a gathering of 30 former merchandise, now recognized as citizens of their new home. Today, we celebrate not just our freedom, but our community, she said, her voice now confident and clear. Each of us carries scars from our past. Each of us knows what it means to be treated as less than a person. But here, we have the opportunity to define ourselves by what we build together, not by what was done to us. She gestured to Kai, who stood nearby. Some of us were fortunate enough to find individuals who recognized our personhood when others did not. Now, we can extend that recognition to others. Our sanctuary is more than a hiding place. It is a statement that no sentient being can be owned, regardless of what any document or system claims. A year later, Homeward Light had become a recognized entity in the Outer Systems. Their legal status remained contested in guild-controlled space, but they had established enough political and economic connections to maintain their independence. The platform had expanded to include additional modules, housing over 100 residents representing 12 different species. They had also formalized their rescue operations, with the Phoenix serving as the flagship of a small fleet of vessels dedicated to locating and extracting those classified as merchandise in various systems. Their operations were more strategic now, focusing on legal challenges and systemic change alongside direct interventions. Kai and Lyra continued to work as a team, though their roles had evolved. Kai served as a diplomatic liaison, leveraging his human status to navigate systems where other species faced discrimination. Lyra directed operations from Homeward Light, coordinating rescue missions and overseeing the technical aspects of the growing sanctuary. In private moments, they often reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when you purchased a defective merchandise at Ordara?" Lyra asked one evening as they sat in the Phoenix's main cabin, now expanded and renovated but still recognizable as the space where she had first found her voice. "Purchased? Never," Kai corrected with a smile. "I paid a ransom, remember? And no, I couldn't have imagined this. I just knew I couldn't walk past that cage without doing something. One small choice," Lyra mused, "and now hundreds of lives changed." "Your choices changed those lives," Kai pointed out, standing up at the tribunal, deciding to help others, creating Homeward Light. "I just opened a cage door." Lyra shook her head. "You gave me a name when everyone else saw merchandise. You recognized a person when others saw property." She touched the small pendant she now wore, a stylized key that had become the symbol of their community. "That recognition is what we offer to others now. On the 24th month anniversary of Lyra's freedom ruling, a new vessel joined the Homeward Light fleet. Larger than the Phoenix but bearing similar modifications. It had been specifically designed for rescue operations in hostile territories. Its name, inscribed on the hull in multiple languages, was Forever Home. As Lyra stood on the observation deck watching the ship dock, Kai joined her, placing a small package in her hands. "What's this?" she asked, unwrapping it to find an identification badge, unlike the standard ones used at Homeward Light. This one bore an official emblem and the title, Director of Sanctuary Operations. "It's official now," Kai explained. "The Outer Systems Coalition has formally recognized Homeward Light as a legitimate sanctuary and extended protection status to our operations in neutral space. You've been appointed as the official director." Lyra stared at the badge, remembering the merchandise tag that had once hung around her neck. "From property to director," she said softly. "A journey I never imagined possible." "Just the beginning," Kai assured her. "The Coalition representatives were impressed by our success. There's talk of establishing similar sanctuaries in other sectors." Lyra looked out at the Forever Home, its sleek lines representing both safety and possibility. "Then we have more work to do," she said, clipping the badge to her jacket. "More cages to open." Together, they watched as a shuttle docked with the new vessel, carrying the first group of technical trainees, former merchandise, now being educated as crew members. Among them was a young Illyrian girl, recently rescued from a mining operation, similar to the one where Lyra had begun her journey as property. "Full circle," Kai observed, as the blue-skinned child stepped hesitantly onto the deck, looking around with the same wariness Lyra had once shown. Lyra nodded and moved forward to greet the new arrivals, extending her hand to the Illyrian girl. "Welcome to Homeward Light," she said warmly. "My name is Lyra. This is your forever home now." The child looked up, confusion and hope battling in her expression. "Forever. Truly forever." "Truly forever," Lyra confirmed, her voice gentle but firm. "No more cages, no more tags. Just your name, your skills, and your future." As the girl took Lyra's outstretched hand, the final traces of merchandise fell away from them both, replaced by the simple, profound recognition of one person greeting another. The most revolutionary act in a universe that had too long denied such basic dignity. Kai watched from a distance, remembering the silent, frightened figure he had found in a rusted cage. The transformation before him was more than personal. It represented the possibility of systemic change, one rescued life at a time. As director of Homeward Light, Lyra would ensure that transformation continued, extending to thousands more across the galaxy, who still waited in cages both literal and metaphorical. The merchandise tag that had once marked Lyra as defective now hung in a small display case in Homeward Light's main hall, not as a relic of shame, but as a reminder of the journey from object to person, from property to leader, from isolation to community. Beside it hung the simple promise that guided their growing movement. No sentient being is merchandise. Every person deserves a forever home. And aboard the vessel that bore that promise as its name, a new generation prepared to carry the message further than its founders had ever imagined possible, ensuring that what had once been exceptional, the recognition of personhood across all species, would someday become the universal standard throughout the stars.